To this day, I have been unable to find a hotel that's Dominican owned. The average household in Cabarete had up to maybe 3 days worth of food at home.
Moraima Capellán returned home to the Dominican Republic to heal and teach yoga. What she found were local families being displaced by foreign developers and most of the tourism money flowing out of the area. Today, she tells the story of the food movement that she helped build to fight back, how to volunteer abroad without causing harm, and what's really behind the country's economic ascent. Moraima, welcome. Happy to have you on the Tourism Lens podcast. What moment did you decide that you're going back to the DR?
My family is from Bonao in La Vega. That's where I spent the early years of my life, and the last few years before my family migrated to New York were in Santo Domingo. My entire life in the US, I constantly thought about living in the Dominican Republic, about returning. Eventually, after I had a major surgery and did some changes in my life and became a yoga instructor, everything was calling me back, and I needed, for my health and my well-being, time away to rest. And I thought, well, this is the time for me to take a year off. That was my plan. Take a sabbatical, connect to my roots. And I came in 2018 and I didn't return. I stayed. That first year here, all I did was teach yoga essentially in the beach and rest. And I think so far in my life, I've never rested so much.
Yeah, I think everyone could use a year like that. Is that why you chose Cabarete? How did that decision come about?
Cabarete was random. My family used to go to Costambar Beach whenever we came back on vacation. So I'd never been to Cabarete or Sosua. But when I was looking for things to do for work, on Instagram, the algorithm popped up the job where I ended up working at the hotel. That job didn't end up being a good fit for me, but it opened the door for teaching yoga at the hotel.
Being back in the DR, what did that feel like? Was it what you expected or was it different?
I didn't experience a culture shock. I adjusted right away to the differences in living in New York to living here.
And so 2018, you were a yoga instructor. I read a very powerful post that you made on Facebook about the whole yoga world in Cabarete, slowly realizing that actually the neighborhoods that are across the street from all of these hotels and yoga studios or Dominicans, low-income families. You said, I'm disappointed in myself to have participated in a business model that furthers white supremacy. Can you explain for everybody listening why Cabarete has these dual sides to it?
Cabarete, from what I've learned so far in terms of history and the North Coast in general, including Sosua, and specifically Cabarete, really started to grow in the late 80s and early 90s with the growth of water sports. Prior to that, there were maybe a dozen families that lived in Cabarete, and it was very rural. Those families, some of them are still here, some of them have been displaced, and as Cabarete has grown and what we here refer to as progress is a real estate boom, several that have happened starting in the late 80s, 90s, and now as well during the pandemic, that have created these systemic issues where most of the beachfront has been developed by foreigners and is full of hotels, villas. To this day, I have been unable to find a hotel that's Dominican owned, and I'm not including Airbnbs. Of course, there are several Airbnbs, but they're not beachfront that I'm aware of. If somebody knows, please correct me, because even when people ask me for referrals, like where can I stay? I don't feel comfortable referring anyone to any of the places here because the systems created are extractive. They're foreign owned. Most of the economic advantages are supposed to occur here, do not stay in the area. And the majority of the population, they're forced into work or a job of servitude where they are working in hotels, but there's very little room for growth and there's no need for education as well at these jobs. They're just serving the incoming visitors. And that model needs drastically to be updated. So from the fact that most of the beachfront and now with this latest real estate boom, most of the land in general is being developed with the the mind of we're attracting visitors, whether that's the tourist that stays here short term or expats that live longer term. It has caused a lot of gentrification and displacement and abuse of the environment and abuse of the land. More than 60% of Cabarete has already been designated by the Ministry of Environment as protected area. So when the town has grown, certain insecurities and gaps in development have also risen because it's either all of the land is being used for tourism or most of it is also off limits for certain development. And it has caused the creation of barrios, of these kind of shanty town neighborhoods where the majority of the working class lives, or your higher end residencies, private condos and villas where Dominicans are only there if they're in servitude to the higher class, let's say, or economic class that can afford that.
What moment did you realize in 2020 the disparity and your role and what you wanted to do next?
Before that, tying it back to the yoga world, it just became very evident that the wellness industry is a part of that gentrification, a part of that displacement. And at the hotel that I ended up working with, I was, I think, the only Dominican so far that had worked in that space. And prior to that, they did a great job of bringing other young foreign teachers, and they never ever marketed their classes to Dominicans or to the working class. I attempted to bring some classes in Spanish, and there's work to be done there because culturally too, yoga is something completely new to the Dominican working class. Now it's maybe more common or more popular in certain cities like Santiago and Santo Domingo, but in this kind of area, most Dominicans don't have access to it. Classes are expensive, and if you're surviving on $300 a month, that's not going to be a priority for you. And the yoga world in general, worldwide, has been critiqued for driving gentrification, for driving the colonization of an ancient practice that comes from brown, Black people. So I got a lot of hate for that post, but now I'm seeing a lot more discourse worldwide about this. And it definitely felt like a disappointment when I realized that I had been a part of that, no matter how much healing yoga brought for me personally and how much healing I witnessed in the students. There's the other side of it where it can also drive a lot of inequality.
Yeah, I'm sure we could all point to something we used to do that now we're just like cringe at it. Can you take me to how you went from being a yoga instructor to being co-founder of Cabarete Sostenible NGO and what you do? Because I think it's pretty amazing. You started it during the pandemic?
Yes.
When hotels shut down, people were left with no jobs.
The story of Cabarete Sostenible happened organically as well. And I can't say that I'm the sole co-founder. Especially at the beginning, there were many community leaders, many volunteers involved to this day as well. Basically, when everything was shut down, March 2020, the Dominican government put in place curfews, a lot of restrictions, and a big part of the population that relies on tourism or byproducts or trickle down of tourism to live on a day-by-day basis, food insecurity became a concern right away. So we, myself and my partner Papo, who also co-founded Cabarete Sostenible, were approached by an expat concerned about food insecurity, and along with other expats, community leaders, volunteers, helped us organize food aid during those first few months. We kind of just deep dived into creating what is now Cabarete Sostenible. We certainly didn't set out immediately, we're going to set up a nonprofit. We were just responding to a need and using our skills and our time to be of service. Eventually, as we analyze with everyone involved, what is the root cause? What is happening here? We came upon food sovereignty, and that because Cabarete developed with tourism, because such a big part of it is restricted area, we rely heavily on the food that is brought in. We don't have any small producers, any small farms. There are cattle farms here and there, but we don't have people growing vegetables, growing food. So even during the pandemic, we would see that the supermarkets were strained, the local supermarkets. Now, compared to the US or other countries where food has to travel, I don't know, hundreds of miles, hours, we're relying on food that's closer, but we still see a vulnerability there. and we see a gap in the populations that are specifically vulnerable.
When you say there's a need, what does that mean? You had families that couldn't survive?
Yeah, so we determined that the average household in Cabarete, and when talking working class, had up to maybe 3 days worth of food at home. So we focused right away on distributing food aid to families that were single parents, unemployed, folks with disabilities. And those are the three populations that we still focus on and that we still provide food supplements or food aid. We're not providing like 100% of what a family needs. So it is a supplement. And in parallel, we opened the community garden and the community farm. So these are spaces where we work with food sovereignty, where it's practical, hands-on, where we are growing food and we are using organic permaculture techniques, ancestral techniques to grow food that is culturally appropriate, that's going to go to the food aid packages, or that's going to be transformed so that we can generate funds. So
Okay. That's amazing. So the farm, I mean, how do you go about finding the land for a farm and then learning how to plant all these things? Right.
This is where everyone that was involved from the beginning came in, because we had such a diverse group of volunteers that were, again, a mix of expats, of concerned citizens, community leaders. And our first community garden was donated for a temporary spot in Kite Beach by another expat as well. We eventually had to move out of that place. And then the community farm where we are, which is part of the protected area, has been facilitated to us because we don't own the land, by another community member. We as a group collectively thought about, okay, right now we have funds that we've been able to generate to purchase food and distribute to these people. But what about in the long term? So that's where the community garden and the community farm came into play. And several volunteers have helped us create that. And now, 5-6 years later, Papo and I, the team that's with us, we've taken courses, we have led different courses, bringing in experts that can guide us and trying to learn as much, reading a ton, making sure that if we find something that doesn't work, we constantly challenge it or change. That has been really important in developing the nonprofit. I do have my family in Bonao and La Vega. They were all farmers. So in many ways, it felt like I was returning to that. It feels right. I love doing it. Love growing food. Love the process from beginning to end. And of course, there's ancestral wisdom here. So anything that we don't know, we talk with the community and we experiment, we figure it out.
That was great. I was going to ask some of the things that you farm or that you grow that are indigenous to the DR.
We try to be as culturally appropriate as possible with what we grow, because eventually we'll go to the food packages or it will be used in the community kitchen. But in the garden, we have a greenhouse and we focus on smaller crops there. So tomatoes, lettuce, radish, remolacha, beets, anything that's a part of the Dominican gastronomy, green beans, vainita, and as much fruit as possible. Because part of the food packages that we provide, we include shelf staples like rice, beans, oatmeal, milk, that kind of thing that can stay stored for a limited time. And then we try to include raw green produce.
Do you still give them out, the packages?
Yeah.
How often?
We do now once a month, and we're doing 30 families a month. We have in our database more than 300 families all throughout Cabarete. So we just rotate them as much as we can. So far, we have distributed more than 4,300 food packages since we began. And then through the community kitchen, we have distributed over 1,000 hot, ready-to-eat meals. The way the community kitchen works, and we opened this 2 years ago next to the community garden. The hardest part of being a nonprofit is the constant asking for donations and looking for grants and fundraising. That can lead to burnout. We put our heads together and we knew that we wanted to start some kind of social enterprise model that could generate funds for our mission. And Papo already had the lease to a space that was being rented rented out to different restaurants and had a history there of managing plant-based Dominican restaurants. We took it over. We operate a Dominican Comedor or Dominican eatery for lunch. It's Dominican traditional food, but vegetarian or plant-based. And the mission there is that all the funds that we generate are going to go back into the food aid program, back into any other cultural or sustainable programs that we have in the community. We designed it as a zero waste kitchen. So not only do we compost all of our food scraps, it's processed right there in the community garden. So it goes back into the soil. Because we do a plate of the day, people can either donate a plate to someone in need, or there's no such thing as food waste in our restaurant. If we have a slow day or in general, there's always going to be leftovers. We package it and we distribute it to our list. In the 2 years that we have been open, we have distributed over 1,000 like hot, ready to eat plates to people in need.
What's been the response to all of this initiative that never existed before? What are you hearing from, say, Dominican families?
Oh, a lot of gratitude, of course. We've had a really good response from the community and amazing response from volunteers that come from outside, our visitors, our expats, and volunteers from the community as well. And that has been really lovely. The farm, which is in the Monumento Natural, we have developed that space. That's not a space where we work with volunteers because it's a restricted area, but essentially the land that we were facilitated is land that the soil has been degraded over time due to cattle or just bad practices when it comes to land stewardship. So part of what we do there is a system called syntropic agroforestry. We were first introduced to this method in another farm that's in La Vega called Finca Tierra Negra. And that's where we became in contact with our mentor now that comes straight from Brazil. And essentially our mission is that we are going to reforest and repair that land. And while we do that, we're planting abundantly, not only native trees, especially native to that area like ceiba, mara. We are reforesting that land and we're also growing food at the same time.
What is the biggest lesson you've derived from all of this work that you've done with food sovereignty and building Cabarete Sostenible?
The biggest lesson and the biggest skill is keeping our ears open constantly, not just in the community for needs, but also in general as a nonprofit. Nonprofit world has a lot of problems and some of them refuse to address them, refuse to be introspective and self-aware. And I think that we've done a really good job of constantly reviewing and analyzing what we're doing. Is this the most effective way, or is this just an ego trip? Is this just a feel-good project? And that's something that we want to stay away from because everyone involved in our team is really passionate about it. Everyone in our team, they're givers naturally. So we have to protect that, but we also have to protect the dignity of the people that we are working with and make sure that it doesn't become an ego-based solution.
Yeah, saviorism.
Yeah. We're very, very careful about that.
Where's the line between someone who is in the DR to contribute versus to extract? And does that still bother you, or are you just so busy that you don't pay attention to that anymore?
It's impossible not to pay attention to it because it often interferes with what we're doing. But it depends. It's on a case-by-case basis. I don't want to generalize. I think for the most part, the people that approach us to collaborate, to volunteer, they are receptive to our rules, to our guidelines. When we do the food aid, we put a hard boundary. You're not going to take pictures of people. You're not going to take pictures of yourself giving out these bags. Have we had people that have tried to do that anyways? Yes, but it's very rare and we address it right away. So for the most part with volunteers, which is how we interact with foreigners the majority of the time, it has been positive. And we have a really good community that supports our events, our fundraising, that supports the community kitchen. So that has been positive. Where things get tricky is that there's constantly a lot going on in Cabarete.
Yeah.
So
I believe you. I've been there many times. Yeah. Yeah.
And some things can distract from our mission. And also it's work to differentiate and to try to, explain to people and to get them to understand that intention isn't important as much as what the results are, what your actions are. So you can come in with the best intentions, but if you don't analyze what you're doing, the results are that you may be extractive, you may be exploiting the people that you supposedly want to help or want to participate in. And that can be a difficult conversation to have.
Can you give a brief example? Because I think this is something people want to learn as well to do better.
See, I think when a lot of times foreigners or expats that come in for the first few months, they don't do a good enough effort of researching what programs aid the community, what programs are working horizontally with the community already exist. So you'll see pop-up groups of people trying to do food aid, yet they're engaging in poverty porn. And simple research or even just asking around, you will find the people that are already doing that, and you can just lend your support instead of creating something separate. So we do see that often, especially with the poverty porn. That's the one thing that just hasn't stopped.
Oh, it drives me nuts. Yeah, the pictures with the kids and stuff, and it's just
it's abusing the dignity of people.
It is.
There's
Absolutely.
no need to do that. You can do good work without exploiting the imagery, exploiting the poverty that people are going through, or whatever situation it is. And I think that's probably the most prominent example that happens often.
The DR has been called the economic superstar of Latin America. I still see that narrative. Every week there's some big project being announced. How do you see things now? Is it still a lack of depth to that narrative, or even a lack of truth?
Both. This current government is really great at marketing the country, but there is general dissatisfaction, and the youth, even the ones that are educated, they're struggling to find work. And with everything happening globally, with the rising cost of living, the rising cost of housing, especially in a place like Cabarete where gentrification is happening often. I know several people that have been displaced and had to move to towns over because they cannot afford rent, because rent is being charged in dollars and there's just seem to be no regulations. So it's pretty marketing. I think similar to greenwashing.
I call it social washing. Right.
I can't say that I have any numbers on it yet, but I see it in the youth, almost desperateness that they want different opportunities and they're looking to leave. The job opportunities just aren't there. And the ones that are there, it's either you're going to be a server, you're going to be a bartender, or you're going to clean in a hotel. But the management positions are very few, or they bring in people from the outside. So whenever I see all of these new hotels, all of these new projects claiming that they're going to bring in thousands of workers, what we hear on the street is very different, because the ones that are here do a lot of practices that are illegal, that are exploitative, and the youth just don't have opportunities.
Yeah.
People are exhausted.
Yeah.
There are also, in the last year, systemic structural problems that are starting to come back again, like electrical issues throughout the whole country.
Oh, yeah.
Shutdowns and infrastructure that's just collapsing. It's insane. And it's disheartening to see.
It is disheartening. What's interesting that I've noticed is Dominicans in the diaspora are moving back to the DR. Have you been watching this wave of reverse migration, and what do you think about it?
It has its pros and cons. I think positively mostly about it because I do believe that, especially my generation, unfortunately, for a lot of us, especially millennials, we're realizing that certain dreams that were pushed our way and we bought into them didn't really turn out, like the American dream. What is leading is to a plethora of mental health issues, of health issues in general, and dissatisfaction and a lack of joy in life. And I know that a lot of the diaspora, when I was there, would think nostalgically about our time here in the Dominican Republic and yearn for that, for a return to our roots, even if we were discouraged by our parents, and our parents had their reasons, had their traumas. So I think it's positive that there's a young wave of people looking to return. I think in many ways this can help the Dominican Republic. I do think that Dominicans around the world should invest here should buy land, should invest in infrastructure, because this is our ancestral home. Do I think we need to be very mindful that we're not replicating the same systems of colonialism, of exploitation? Absolutely. But it's better than having other foreigners that have no ties to the culture, to the heritage, that are just looking at this land with money in their eyes, that may not care for it or respect it the way that we could. I'm not saying that all of us do.
I totally agree with you. I think, though, that you can have that heritage and still be a colonizer.
Oh, yes.
I don't know what the word is for it. It's probably not colonizer, but something else, because I have seen in the last few years where you do have Jamaicans who come with the mentality of the United States, capitalistic, wealth, real estate, and only show the luxury side. And not to say that you have to show the poor areas, but just to say that it's very concentrated on this image of paradise without accountability. And then you're also bringing in probably more foreigners than not.
Yeah, I don't think you're wrong. Absolutely. I'm trying to stay positive.
I know. I feel like there's no pause, when you move somewhere, you just have to pause and learn. Just be quiet, and learn for a couple of years.
Yes. I tell that to people too. You can't arrive here and immediately, a month later, a week later, set up a business. You need to spend time observing. You need to spend time learning the land. That's actually something that we do in permaculture, agroforestry, because you're setting yourself up to either be scammed or to create a system that's going to exploit other people. And then you end up burned out or bashing the whole country. And that's kind of your own naiveness.
I think that there's a lot of judgment that comes.
And we haven't, as a country, the Dominican Republic, we have not addressed the root causes of a lot of our systemic problems either. So then it gets really muddled when you're having people coming from the diaspora or outside, thinking that they're coming with solutions, but not taking the time, like you mentioned, to really analyze, to really sit with it. So it's tricky.
What is your vision for, let's say, 10 years from now? Where would you like to see Cabarete Sostenible and just your overall life in the DR as a Dominican?
I was always terrible at this question. We tried to answer this question when we first started with Cabarete Sostenible, and we were like, so ambitious. We were like, we were going to eliminate food insecurity in 5 years. Oh my God. See, that was something that was too presumptuous of us. And now that we've navigated the government system, more of the culture, the local issues and things like that, that we know that these deep problems are going to take a while, because it's almost like we're going against the current. But so far, we have grown as a team, and we're a source of employment for several of our team members, obviously. So I would like to see it grow in that way. I'm not thinking like a huge expansion, but for it to be a place that can sustain livelihoods, that can be a place of practice, of experiment, and of cultural pride. And we want to disrupt the systems, challenge it, and make everyone rethink where it's pertinent, how we're moving and how we're growing. Personally, I love the farming, so I know that I'm going to be doing that in the next few years.
I'll definitely be coming to that community kitchen.
The food is really good. You will like it.
I bet it is. It looks it. Thank you.
Thank you as well.
Thanks for joining me on the Tourism Lens podcast. For more conscious travel, subscribe to my YouTube channel.